When I saw her post those words, "our forever home," under a photo of my lakeside retreat, something inside me finally broke. What I did next with that property deed shocked my entire family and left her with nothing but ashes and broken dreams. I'm grateful you're here to witness this journey. Stay with me until the very end and comment which city you're watching from so I can see how far my story reaches across the world. At 70 years old, I thought I'd weathered every storm life could throw at a person. I'd buried my beloved husband after 42 years of marriage, raised 3 children through their teenage rebellions and adult struggles, survived breast cancer at 58, and rebuilt my life from financial ruin after the 2008 recession nearly cost me everything. But nothing, absolutely nothing in my 7 decades on this earth prepared me for the day I discovered what my own son had been hiding from me for nearly a year. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and I've always been the kind of mother who would move mountains for her children. Some might say I gave too much, sacrificed too deeply, enabled too freely. But that's what mothers do, isn't it? We pour ourselves into these tiny humans and hope that someday they'll remember the love even if they forget the sacrifices. I live in a modest 3-bedroom ranch house in Lakewood, Colorado, just outside Denver. It's not fancy. The carpet needs replacing, the kitchen cabinets are from 1987, and the heating system makes strange groaning sounds on cold nights. But it's mine. Paid off. Mortgage-free. After my husband Thomas passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, the life insurance was just enough to clear our debts and leave me with this house and one other property that meant more to me than any amount of money ever could. The Evergreen Valley Lake House. Thomas and I bought that property in 1993 with every penny we'd saved over 15 years of marriage. It was a fixer-upper back then, a small 2-bedroom cabin on 3 acres of pristine Colorado mountain land overlooking Crystal Lake in the Rocky Mountain foothills near Evergreen. We spent weekends and summers transforming it from a dilapidated shack into our family sanctuary. Thomas rebuilt the deck himself, board by board. I planted the wildflower garden that still blooms every spring. Together, we installed the picture windows that frame the lake view like a living painting. That cabin wasn't just property, it was where we celebrated every Thanksgiving and Christmas, where our children learned to fish off the old wooden dock, where our grandchildren caught their first glimpses of wild elk grazing at dawn, where Thomas proposed to me 32 years ago on a snowy December evening with nothing but a campfire, a blanket, and a simple gold band he'd saved 3 months to buy. After Thomas died, I couldn't bring myself to sell it, even though the property taxes and maintenance stretched my fixed income to its limits. That cabin held every happy memory I had left of the man who'd been my partner, my best friend, my entire world. Selling it would have been like selling pieces of my own soul. My son, Chris, we call him Chris, was always my golden child. At 47 years old, he'd built an impressive career as a commercial real estate developer in downtown Denver. He had the charm, the intelligence, the drive that made everything he touched seem to turn to gold. He'd married his college sweetheart, Diane, right after graduation, and together they'd built what looked like the perfect life. A beautiful home in the Cherry Creek neighborhood, 2 accomplished daughters, Sophia, 19, studying pre-med at CU Boulder, and Emma, 16, a competitive figure skater with Olympic aspirations. Diane and I had grown close over the 24 years she'd been part of our family. She wasn't like some daughter-in-laws who view their husband's mother as competition or interference. Diane included me in everything: holiday planning, birthday celebrations, even girls' shopping trips when she needed to buy gifts for the kids. She called me every Sunday afternoon without fail, just to chat about her week, ask about mine, share funny stories about the girls. I trusted her completely. More importantly, I trusted Chris completely. That trust made what I discovered so much more devastating. It was a Tuesday morning in late March, one of those perfect early spring days in Colorado where the sky is impossibly blue and the air still carries the crisp bite of winter mornings but hints at the warmth to come. I was at my weekly book club meeting at the Belmar Library in Lakewood, Colorado, discussing our latest selection, a mystery novel about family secrets that, in retrospect, seems almost too perfectly ironic. My reading group consisted of 6 women, all roughly my age, all dealing with various stages of retirement, widowhood, and the strange new chapters of life that open up when your children are grown and your spouse is gone. We met every Tuesday at 10 a.m., drank terrible coffee from the library's ancient machine, and spent as much time gossiping about our families as we did discussing books. I was mid-sentence, making some point about the protagonist's relationship with her daughter, when my phone buzzed in my purse. I normally would have ignored it. We had an unofficial rule about phones during book club, but something made me glance down at the notification. It was from Patricia, one of my book club friends who'd stepped out to take a call from her dentist a few minutes earlier. The message was simple but alarming. Eleanor, check Instagram right now. Search for Sienna Castellano. Is that your lake house?
"Excuse me for just a moment," I murmured to the group, stepping into the hallway where the library's weak Wi-Fi signal was slightly stronger. I opened Instagram, an app I barely understood how to use, having only created an account 6 months earlier because Emma had insisted I needed to see her figure skating videos. I searched for the name Patricia had sent, Sienna Castellano. The profile loaded slowly, agonizingly on my outdated phone. And then I saw it. The profile picture showed a woman who couldn't have been older than 35. Honey blonde hair in perfect beach waves, flawless makeup, the kind of artificial-looking beauty that comes from expensive procedures and professional photography. Her bio read, "Living my absolute best life with my king, real estate mogul, manifesting abundance and luxury. Crystal Lake is calling, mountain." But it was her posts that made my vision tunnel and my hands begin to shake uncontrollably. Photo after photo of my lake house. Her, standing on my deck in a designer bikini, champagne glass raised to the camera. Her, cooking in my kitchen with its distinctive pine cabinets and stone countertops that Thomas had installed himself. Her, lounging on my porch furniture, the handcrafted cedar chairs Thomas had built the summer before he died. Her, posed artfully on my dock at sunset, the one where Thomas had proposed, where we'd scattered some of his ashes after the funeral. I scrolled back through her feed with mounting horror. The posts went back months. 9 months, to be precise. Nearly a year of this stranger treating my sacred space like her personal Instagram backdrop. The captions were worse than the photos. "Another perfect weekend at our mountain paradise. Grateful for this incredible man who gives me everything I've ever dreamed of. Home is wherever I'm with you, baby." And then, the post from just 2 days ago that Patricia had seen, the one that made my blood turn to ice. The photo showed Sienna on the deck at golden hour, the lake shimmering behind her, wearing an expensive-looking sundress and holding what appeared to be legal documents. The sunset cast everything in warm, romantic light. She looked like she'd stepped out of a luxury real estate magazine. The caption read, "It's official. Our forever home is finally ours. Thank you to my amazing man for making all my dreams come true. Crystal Lake, here we come. This is where we'll build our empire, raise our future family, and live the life we've always deserved. Hashtag forever home, lake life, blessed, manifesting abundance and luxury." I stared at those words until they blurred. Our forever home? Finally ours? Build our future family? My fingers moved on autopilot, zooming in on the documents in her hands. Even on my small phone screen, I could make out enough. They appeared to be property transfer papers, deed documents. Someone was giving her my house. Someone was transferring my property, mine and Thomas's sacred place, to this stranger. And in several photos throughout her feed, I could see him, never fully in frame, as if he was deliberately staying just out of clear view. But I could see enough. An arm around her waist wearing a watch I recognized, the Tag Heuer I'd given Chris for his 45th birthday, a hand on her shoulder with the distinctive scar across the knuckles from a childhood bicycle accident, a partial reflection in the lake house window showing a tall figure in the exact style of business casual Chris always wore. My son. My Christopher. The boy I raised, the man I trusted with everything, was living a secret life with this woman at my lake house. Eleanor? Eleanor, are you all right? Patricia's voice broke through my shock. She'd followed me into the hallway and was now gripping my arm, her face tight with concern. You look like you're going to faint. I couldn't speak. I thrust the phone toward her with shaking hands. Patricia took one look at the screen and her expression shifted from concern to fury. Oh, Eleanor! Oh no! Is that Christopher? I managed to nod. Does Diane know? I shook my head. Patricia pulled me into the library's quiet reading room, away from our book club friends. What are you going to do? I don't know, I whispered. But even as I said it, I knew I had to find out the truth. I had to know how deep this betrayal went, and I had to know what finally ours meant in that caption. I left book club early, mumbling something about feeling unwell, which wasn't a lie. I felt physically ill. My stomach churned, my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and my heart was pounding so hard I worried I might actually be having a cardiac event. Instead of driving home, I found myself pulling into a Starbucks parking lot, sitting in my 15-year-old Honda Civic, and doing something I'd never done before. I created a fake Instagram account. It felt ridiculous and slightly pathetic, a 70-year-old woman catfishing through social media like a jealous teenager. But I needed to see everything. Sienna's account was public, but I wanted to look through everything without her potentially seeing that Eleanor Whittemore was viewing her posts. I named the account @ColoradoHiker2024, used a stock photo of mountain scenery as the profile picture, and began my investigation.
Sienna Castellano's life, as portrayed on Instagram, was a carefully curated highlight reel of luxury and romance. Designer handbags, expensive restaurant meals, first-class travel. And throughout it all, references to my man, my king, the love of my life, always carefully cropped or angled to avoid showing his face clearly. But the posts about the lake house were the most numerous and the most painful. She'd been there dozens of times over the past 9 months. She'd hosted what looked like small parties there. I could see other people in some photos, other young, attractive people I didn't recognize, all enjoying my property like they had every right to be there. She'd redecorated parts of the interior. I could see new throw pillows that I hadn't purchased, different artwork on the walls, modern light fixtures replacing the rustic ones Thomas had chosen. She'd made herself at home in my home. I found her Facebook account next, which was less carefully curated but provided more information. She was 34 years old. She listed her occupation as real estate investment specialist and her employer as Castellano Property Group. She'd gone to Metropolitan State University in Denver. She was originally from Arizona. And then I found the comments section on that Forever Home post. Her friends' responses ranged from enthusiastic congratulations to pointed questions. OMG, finally! I'm so happy for you both. When do you officially move in? About time he made it official. You deserve this, girl. Wait, I thought you said he was married. Did he finally leave her? That last comment, from someone named Jessica Martinez, had been posted 6 hours ago. Sienna hadn't responded to it, but it told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just an affair. This was a relationship, a serious, long-term relationship where Chris had apparently made promises that involved my property. I sat in that parking lot for nearly an hour, scrolling through months of posts, piecing together a timeline of betrayal. The first photo at the lake house appeared in early June of last year, almost 10 months ago. Based on the comments and captions, Chris had apparently told Sienna that the property was his family's cabin and that they could use it whenever they wanted. Use it like it was a timeshare, like it wasn't the repository of 30 years of my memories and my late husband's legacy. The posts increased in frequency over the following months. By September, Sienna was referring to it as our cabin. By December, it was our special place. By February, it was our future home. And now, in March, it was officially ours. Finally, I did what I'd been dreading. I called Chris's cell phone. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. His professional, business-like voice. "This is Christopher Whitmore with Apex Commercial Development. Please leave a detailed message and I will return your call within 24 hours. I hung up without leaving a message and immediately called again. This time, it went straight to voicemail. He declined the call. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone, but I managed to send a text. "Christopher, this is your mother. Call me immediately. It's urgent." 3 minutes passed. 5. 10. The read receipt showed he'd seen the message, but no response came. I tried a different approach. I called Diane. "Eleanor, hi!" Her voice was warm, cheerful, completely normal. "How is book club? Did you all finish that mystery novel?" "Diane, sweetheart, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. Where is Chris right now?" There was a pause. "He's on a business trip. He left Sunday morning and won't be back until Friday evening. He's meeting with investors in Grand Junction about a new commercial property development." "Why? Is something wrong?" Grand Junction, a city on the western slope of Colorado, nearly 4 hours away from Denver, nowhere near Evergreen or Crystal Lake. "Diane, I need you to do something for me. Can you check his location on your phone? You share locations with each other, don't you?" Another pause, longer this time. I could hear the shift in her voice, the first hint of concern creeping in. "We do, but Eleanor, you're starting to worry me. What's going on?" "Please, just check. I'll explain everything, but I need you to check his location right now." I heard her tapping, then silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "That doesn't make sense," Diane said slowly. "His location is it's showing Evergreen, near your lake house, but that can't be right. He specifically said he was going to Grand Junction. He showed me the hotel reservation and everything." "What hotel?" "The Grand Vista Hotel and Conference Center. He said he'd be in meetings all week." "Diane, I need you to call that hotel right now and ask if Christopher Whitmore has a reservation." "Eleanor, what is going on?" "Please, just do it. I'll hold." I heard her put me on hold, then the muffled sound of another call being made. When she came back on the line 3 minutes later, her voice had changed completely. "They have no reservation under his name. They have no record of any business conferences this week. Eleanor, why is Chris's location showing at your lake house when he told me he was in Grand Junction?" "Because he's been lying to you, sweetheart, and I need to show you something. Are you home right now?" "Yes, I'm working from home today. The girls are at school." "I'm coming over. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't call Chris. Don't text him. Don't let him know we've talked. Can you do that for me?" "Eleanor, you're scaring me." "I know. I'm scared too. But we need to face this together. I'll be there soon." Diane and Chris lived in a beautiful 2-story colonial in the Cherry Creek neighborhood, one of Denver's most affluent areas. The house was worth well over $1 million, a testament to Chris's success in commercial real estate development. As I pulled into their circular driveway, I was struck by how perfect everything looked. Manicured lawn, seasonal flowers and elegant planters, a basketball hoop over the garage where Chris played with the girls on weekends. The perfect facade of the perfect family. Diane opened the door before I could knock. She'd clearly been watching for me. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying or was trying hard not to. "Come in," she said quietly. We sat at her kitchen island, one of those massive marble-topped islands that could seat 8 people for casual meals. Diane had made coffee, but neither of us touched it. "Show me," she said. "Show me whatever it is you found." I pulled out my phone and opened Sienna's Instagram account. I watched Diane's face as she scrolled through the posts, watched the color drain from her cheeks, watched her hands begin to tremble, just like mine had. 9 months, she whispered. "He's been bringing her to your lake house for 9 months? "That's not the worst part," I said gently, and showed her the most recent post, the one about our forever home and finally ours. Diane stared at the photo, at the documents in Sienna's hands for a long moment. Then she stood up abruptly and walked to Chris's home office down the hall. I followed her. The office was exactly what you'd expect from a successful real estate developer. Expensive desk, leather chair, walls covered with framed property photos and awards. Diane went straight to his filing cabinet and began pulling out folders. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "Property documents, financial records, anything that might tell us what finally ours means." We spent the next hour going through Chris's files. Diane knew where everything was. She handled most of their household finances and paperwork. What we found made my stomach turn. There were documents related to my lake house property. Recent documents. Transfer of title papers prepared but not yet filed. The proposed new owner? Sienna Marie Castellano. "He's trying to transfer your property to her," Diane said, her voice hollow. "How is that even possible? It's your house." "I don't know," I said, studying the papers. "These haven't been filed yet. They're not official, but he has copies of my original deed, my property tax information, everything he'd need to—" I trailed off as a horrible realization hit me. 2 years ago, after a minor health scare that turned out to be nothing serious, I'd asked Chris to help me organize my legal affairs. I'd given him power of attorney for healthcare decisions in case something happened to me. I'd also, at his suggestion, added him to the property deed as a joint tenant with right of survivorship, a common estate planning strategy that would allow the property to transfer to him automatically when I died, avoiding probate. At the time, it had seemed responsible and practical. Chris was my oldest child, the one with business expertise, the one I trusted completely to handle my affairs if I couldn't. Now I realized what I'd done. I'd given him legal ownership rights to my property. Not complete ownership. I was still the primary owner, but enough that he could potentially claim joint interest. Enough that he might be able to argue he had the right to transfer or sell his share. "He's using the joint tenancy," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "He's claiming he has ownership rights because I put him on the deed." "Can he do that? Can he just give away your property?" "I don't know. I need to call a lawyer." "But Diane, this means he's been planning this for a while. This isn't some spontaneous affair. He's been systematically working toward taking my property and giving it to her." Diane sank into Chris's desk chair, her face in her hands. 24 years. I've been married to him for 24 years. We have 2 daughters together. We've built this entire life. And he's throwing it all away for her? "I'm so sorry," I said, putting my hand on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry." "When did it start? How did I not see it?" We spent the next 2 hours piecing together the timeline based on Sienna's Instagram posts, Chris's travel calendar, and Diane's memories of the past year. What emerged was a pattern of calculated deception. The affair had likely started about a year ago. Chris had met Sienna through work. She apparently worked in property investment, possibly even on deals Chris was involved in. The first Instagram post at the lake house was from early June of last year, which meant the relationship had progressed quickly from professional to personal. Chris had used a combination of fake business trips, early morning site visits, and weekend property inspections to cover his absences. He was careful, methodical, never staying away long enough to raise serious suspicions. A day trip here, an overnight there, a long weekend every month or so. He told me he was checking on your property because you were worried about vandalism in the area, Diane said, her voice bitter with the memory. Back in July, he said you'd called him concerned about teenagers breaking into vacation homes in the area. He said he was going up there every couple of weeks just to check on things, make sure everything was secure. I actually thought it was sweet that he was being so attentive to your concerns. I never called him about anything like that, I said quietly. He used me as his excuse. He made you think he was being a good son, while he was really spending time with his mistress in my house. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He'd weaponized my trust, my property, and my relationship with Diane to cover his betrayal of us both. What do we do? Diane asked finally. How do we confront this? I looked at this woman who'd been like a daughter to me for over 2 decades. I saw the same fury and hurt I felt reflected in her eyes. We go to the lake house, I said, tonight. We drive up there and we confront them together. No warnings, no phone calls to give him time to prepare lies. We catch them in the act and we demand answers. What if... Diane stopped, then started again. What if seeing them together breaks me? What if I can't handle it? Then we'll handle it together. But Diane, if we don't do this now, if we give him time to spin this, he'll find a way to make us doubt what we know. He'll minimize. He'll explain it away. He'll make it seem like we're overreacting. We need to see the truth with our own eyes so he can't gaslight us into questioning reality. Diane nodded slowly, resolve hardening in her expression. Okay, let's go. But I'm driving. Your hands are still shaking. The drive from Cherry Creek to Evergreen normally takes about 40 minutes, longer during rush hour. Diane and I made it in 35, speeding through mountain curves as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the peaks. Neither of us spoke much during the drive. What was there to say? We were 2 women united by betrayal, driving toward a confrontation that would change all our lives irrevocably. The weight of that knowledge sat between us like a third passenger. As we climbed into the mountains, the Denver suburbs gave way to pine forests and mountain meadows. The air grew thinner, crisper. Under any other circumstances, I would have found the drive beautiful. Today, the beauty felt cruel, a reminder of all the times Thomas and I had made this same drive with hope and joy in our hearts. We reached Evergreen just after 5 p.m. The small mountain town was busy with its typical Tuesday activity: tourists browsing art galleries, locals picking up groceries, mountain bikers loading gear. Everything was so normal, so peaceful. No one else knew that my world was shattering. As we turned onto the private access road that led to Crystal Lake, Diane gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles went white. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered. "This morning I woke up thinking I had a normal marriage, thinking my husband was in Grand Junction working, thinking my life was exactly what it appeared to be." "I know," I said quietly. "I'm sorry you have to go through this. Don't apologize. You didn't cause this. He did." The lake house came into view through the trees. And there, parked in my driveway like they owned the place, were 2 vehicles I recognized from Sienna's Instagram posts. Chris's Tesla Model S, sleek and silver, his pride and joy. And next to it, a white Range Rover with a custom license plate that read SNNA Lux. "Subtle," Diane muttered bitterly. We parked on the access road about 50 yards away, hidden by the trees. For a moment, we just sat there, both of us gathering our courage. Through the large picture windows, the ones Thomas had installed to capture the perfect lake view, we could see them. Chris and Sienna, standing in my kitchen, his arms around her waist from behind, both of them laughing about something. They looked relaxed, intimate, completely comfortable, like a real couple in their real home. The sight of it made me physically ill. "I'm going to throw up," Diane said, turning away from the window. "Breathe," I told her, though I was taking my own advice. "Just breathe. We're going to walk up there, we're going to knock on the door, and we're going to face this. What if she's horrible? What if she's everything I'm not? Then that says everything about his character and nothing about yours." We got out of the car and walked slowly toward the house. With each step, I could see more details through the windows. Sienna was wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse. Expensive casual, the kind of outfit that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her blonde hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. She also looked young, so young. As we approached the deck, I could hear music playing inside, something modern and upbeat that I didn't recognize. Through the windows, I watched Sienna dance away from Chris, laughing, and pull out her phone. She positioned herself in front of the Lakeview window, my favorite window, where I'd watched countless sunsets with Thomas, and started posing for selfies. I watched in real time as she checked the photos, selected one, and began typing a caption. Diane saw it too. "She's posting about this right now. She's posting about being in your house while we're standing right here." That's when something in me snapped. I marched straight to the front door, the door Thomas had refinished himself, with its distinctive hand-carved pine detail, and pounded on it with both fists. "Christopher Michael Whitmore, open this door right now." The music inside stopped abruptly. Through the window, I saw Chris's face go from confused to shocked to absolutely horrified in the space of about 3 seconds. He practically ran to the door, nearly tripping over his own feet. When he opened it and saw both of us standing there, his mother and his wife, unified in our fury, all the color drained from his face. "Mom! Diane!" His voice came out as barely a whisper. What are you doing here?" "What are we doing here?" Diane's voice was shaking with rage. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Grand Junction, at a business conference, at the Grand Vista Hotel, remember?" "I can explain." "Explain what?" I cut him off, my own anger finding its voice. "Explain why you've been bringing your mistress to my house for almost a year? Explain why there are property transfer documents in your office with her name on them? Explain why she's posting on social media about our forever home?" Behind Chris, Sienna had appeared. Up close, she was even more striking than in her photos, but there was something hard in her eyes, something calculating. "Who are these people, Chris?" she asked, her voice carrying just a hint of annoyance, like we were unwanted salespeople interrupting her evening. "Who are these people?" Diane's voice went up an octave. "I'm his wife, the wife he's been married to for 24 years, the mother of his 2 daughters. And this is his mother, whose house you've been treating like your personal vacation rental for the past year." Sienna's eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly, too quickly. She looked at Chris with what seemed to be genuine confusion, but something about it felt rehearsed. "Chris, you told me you and your wife were separated. You said the divorce was almost final. You said this was your family's property and you had every right to bring me here." I watched my son's face carefully. He wasn't denying it. He wasn't rushing to correct her. He was calculating, trying to figure out which lie would work best in this situation. "Separated?" Diane's voice broke. "We're not separated. We had dinner together as a family 3 nights ago. We're planning Emma's 16th birthday party next month. She trailed off, the reality hitting her. "You've been lying to her, too. You've been lying to everyone." What followed was one of the most painful hours of my entire life. We moved the confrontation from the doorway to the deck. I couldn't bear to have this fight inside the house where Thomas and I had made so many happy memories. Chris tried every strategy in the manipulation playbook. First, he attempted to minimize. It's not what you think. Sienna and I are just friends. She needed a place to stay, and I offered to let her use the cabin. When that didn't work, because even he couldn't maintain that lie in the face of Sienna's Instagram feed full of romantic captions, he tried to redirect. Why are you going through my private things? Those documents in my office were confidential. You had no right. I had every right, Diane shot back. I'm your wife, and those documents involve stealing from your own mother. Then came the gaslighting attempts. You're overreacting. This is all a big misunderstanding. If you just calm down and listen. Don't you dare tell me to calm down, I said, my voice cold with fury. You brought your mistress to your father's house. You've been planning to steal my property. You've been lying to your wife and your children for a year. There is no version of calm that is appropriate for this situation. Sienna, for her part, alternated between playing the victim and going on the offensive. She claims she had no idea Chris was still married, despite multiple commenters on her social media asking about his wife. She insisted she thought the lake house was Chris's property, even though she could see family photos of me and Thomas all over the walls. And then she made her crucial mistake. Listen, she said, her voice taking on a harder edge. I don't know what kind of weird family dynamics y'all have, but Chris and I are in love. We're building a life together. He promised me we could have this house, and a promise is a promise. He promised you my house? I felt my blood pressure rising. The house that belongs to me. The house where my husband's ashes are scattered? He promised you that? He said it was going to be his anyways eventually, when when you passed. He said we might as well start making plans now. Make it official before I died. I finished for her. He was planning to take my house before I died? Chris finally found his voice, and it was defensive and angry. Mom, you're 70 years old. You can't maintain that property anymore. It's too much for you. The taxes alone are eating up your income. I was trying to help. Help? You were trying to help by stealing from me and giving my property to your mistress? It's not stealing if I'm already on the deed. I have legal ownership rights. I was just trying to consolidate things, make decisions about the property's future before you got too old to understand the financial implications. The condescension in his voice was breathtaking. Too old to understand? I may be 70, Christopher, but I'm not senile. I understand perfectly well what you were trying to do. You were trying to take advantage of the joint tenancy I granted you for estate planning purposes. You were trying to claim ownership of property that is mine, that my husband and I built together, so you could hand it over to your mistress like some kind of romantic gesture. She's not my mistress, she's my girlfriend.
The confrontation on my deck lasted until well past dark. What started as shock and anger eventually dissolved into something raw, grief. Diane cried, I cried. Even Chris, when he finally stopped trying to defend the indefensible, shed tears. Though whether they were tears of genuine remorse or just fear of consequences, I couldn't tell. Sienna left around 8 p.m., driving away in her Range Rover with a screech of tires that sent gravel flying. Her parting words to Chris were, "Call me when you've dealt with this drama. I can't handle all this negativity." Drama. Negativity. That's what she called the destruction of a 24-year marriage and the theft of a grieving widow's property. After she left, Chris tried one more time to explain himself. He sat on the deck steps, the same steps where his father had taught him to whittle wood when he was 8 years old, and attempted to make us understand his perspective. "I love her," he said quietly. "I know that doesn't excuse anything, but I need you to understand that this isn't just some fling. Sienna makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. She's ambitious, driven, passionate about the same things I am. With her, I feel like I can be the version of myself I was always meant to be." "And what version is that?" Diane asked, her voice hollow. "The version that lies to his family? The version that steals from his elderly mother? The version that throws away his children's stability for a woman young enough to be his daughter? She's 34. That's hardly young enough to be my daughter. You're 47, Christopher. She's 13 years younger than you. When you were graduating college, she was in elementary school. He had no response to that. What about Sophia and Emma? I asked. Have you thought about what this will do to them? For the first time, I saw genuine pain cross his face. They'll understand eventually. When they're older, when they have their own relationships, they'll understand that sometimes you have to follow your heart. They'll understand that their father abandoned their mother for a woman barely older than Sophia. They'll understand that you valued your midlife crisis over their emotional well-being. We went in circles for another hour before Diane finally stood up and said, I want a divorce. I want you out of the house by this weekend. I want full custody of the girls until we can work out an arrangement that doesn't expose them to your affair partner. And I want you to sign a document relinquishing any claim to Eleanor's property. Chris's head snapped up. Diane, let's not make rash decisions. Rash? You've been lying to me for a year. There's nothing rash about this. It's the most clear-headed decision I've made in 12 months. He tried to argue, to negotiate, to buy time, but Diane was done. I'd never seen her like this, steel-spined and certain. The woman who'd always been so accommodating, so eager to keep the peace, had found her backbone. We left the lake house around 10 p.m. Chris stayed behind, presumably to clean up evidence of his double life. As Diane drove us back down the mountain, she said, I'm sorry for dragging you into this confrontation. I know this isn't how you wanted to spend your Tuesday. You didn't drag me anywhere. This is my battle as much as yours, maybe more. He was trying to steal my home. Do you think he'll actually sign papers giving up his claim to the property? I stared out at the dark forest rushing past. No, I don't think he will, which means I need to take other steps to protect what's mine. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed in my small Lakewood house, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the confrontation, every excuse Chris had made, every cruel comment from Sienna, every heartbroken expression on Diane's face. But more than that, I kept thinking about the bigger picture that was slowly coming into focus. This wasn't a spontaneous affair that had gotten out of hand. This was calculated, premeditated. Chris had deliberately positioned himself to take control of my property. He'd used the trust I placed in him when I added him to the deed, turning a reasonable estate planning decision into a weapon against me. The question that kept me awake was, how far did this go? What else had he done that I didn't know about? At 3 a.m., I got up and made coffee. Then I sat at my kitchen table and started going through my own financial records, looking for anything unusual. Bank statements, property tax bills, insurance policies, everything I could find. It took me 2 hours to find the first discrepancy. My property tax bill for the lake house had gone up significantly this year, nearly 30%. That wasn't unusual given rising property values in Colorado mountain communities. But when I looked more closely at the billing statement, I noticed something strange. The mailing address for the tax bill had been changed. Instead of coming to my Lakewood address, as it had for 30 years, it was now being sent to Chris's office address at Apex Commercial Development. I'd never authorized that change. I pulled out more documents. My homeowner's insurance for the lake house had also been modified. The coverage limits had been reduced from $850,000 to $500,000, and the policyholder contact information had been changed to list Chris as the primary contact instead of me. Again, I'd never authorized these changes.
My hands were shaking as I realized what I was seeing. Chris hadn't just been planning to transfer the property to Sienna. He'd been quietly taking control of all the administrative aspects of ownership. Redirecting mail, changing contact information, positioning himself as the person who handled all property-related business. If I hadn't discovered the affair, if this had continued for another year or two, he could have gradually erased me from the property's paper trail entirely. By the time I realized what was happening, he could have claimed he'd been managing the property for years, that I'd essentially abandoned my ownership responsibilities, that he was the de facto owner, regardless of what the deed said. It was sophisticated, methodical, terrifying. At 6 a.m., I called the one person I knew could help me understand the legal implications of what I was discovering. Eleanor? It's 6 in the morning. Is everything all right? Patricia Wu, my book club friend, who also happened to be a retired real estate attorney, sounded groggy but concerned. Patricia, I need your help. I need to know if what I'm seeing constitutes fraud. She was at my house within 45 minutes, still in her bathrobe, but carrying a briefcase full of legal resources. I showed her everything: the property transfer documents I'd found in Chris's office, the changed mailing addresses, the reduced insurance coverage, the whole timeline of deception. Patricia studied the documents in silence for nearly an hour, making notes on a legal pad, occasionally muttering phrases like undue influence and breach of fiduciary duty. Finally, she looked up at me with grim determination. Eleanor, this is serious, very serious. Your son has been committing what could be classified as financial elder abuse. He's used his power of attorney and his position of trust to manipulate your property ownership. Even though he has some legitimate ownership interest through the joint tenancy, the way he's been handling this, redirecting your mail, changing contact information, preparing transfer documents without your consent, all of this could be considered fraudulent. Can I stop him? Can I remove him from the deed? Yes, but it's not simple. You'll need to file a quiet title action to clarify ownership. You'll need to revoke his power of attorney immediately. You'll need to document everything he's done and potentially file a complaint with Adult Protective Services for financial exploitation. Adult Protective Services? Patricia, I'm 70, not 90. I'm not some confused elderly woman. That's exactly the point, she interrupted. You're a competent adult who's being systematically defrauded by someone who has a legal duty to act in your best interest. Age isn't the issue here. Abuse of trust is. And the fact that you're catching this early while you're still sharp and aware actually works in your favor. It demonstrates that you're fully capable of managing your own affairs and that his actions were unauthorized. I felt sick. The word abuse kept echoing in my head. My own son was abusing me, financially exploiting me, using my age and his position of trust as weapons against me. There's something else you need to know, Patricia continued, flipping through more documents. These property transfer papers, they're not just preliminary drafts. They're nearly complete. He's scheduled a notary appointment for next week. If you hadn't discovered this when you did, he would have had these papers filed within days. Once they're filed and recorded, it becomes much harder to reverse the transfer. Next week? He was going to do this next week? According to the date stamp on these documents, yes. Eleanor, I think your confrontation last night came at exactly the right time. A few more days, and you might have lost your house entirely. Patricia referred me to Marcus Chen, a property litigation attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. By 10 a.m., I was sitting in his downtown Denver office, surrounded by law books and framed legal credentials, telling my story to a man who listened with the kind of intense focus that made me feel both validated and frightened. Marcus was in his late 50s, with silver hair and the careful, measured speech patterns of someone who spent decades in courtrooms. He took notes on everything I said, occasionally stopping me to ask specific questions about dates, documents, and conversations. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, when I finished, I want to be very clear about what we're dealing with here. Your son has committed multiple acts that could constitute financial crimes: fraud, forgery if he signed anything with your name without authorization, exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I'm not vulnerable, I interrupted. Legally, you are. Colorado law defines a vulnerable adult as anyone over 70 or anyone who is impaired in their ability to manage their own affairs. You meet the age threshold, which means the legal protections and potential penalties are more serious. That works in your favor. He walked me through my options. I could file a civil suit seeking to remove Chris from the property deed and recover any damages. I could file a complaint with Adult Protective Services, which could trigger a criminal investigation. I could seek a restraining order preventing Chris from accessing or making any decisions about the property. I could do all of these things simultaneously. What I recommend, he said, is that we move aggressively and immediately.
First, we file for emergency relief to prevent any property transfers. Second, we revoke all powers of attorney and remove his name from any financial accounts or property documents where he has authority. Third, we file a formal complaint documenting everything he's done. And fourth, we prepare for the possibility that this gets ugly. How ugly?
He's going to fight back. When people are caught in financial fraud, especially family members, they often double down. They claim you're confused, that you're misremembering conversations, that they were acting in your best interest. They make you out to be the problem. You need to be prepared for your son to attack your credibility, your memory, and your mental competence. The thought of Chris doing that, of him telling people his mother was senile or confused, hurt more than anything else that had happened so far. There's one more thing, Marcus added. If we pursue this aggressively, if we file criminal complaints and civil lawsuits, there's no going back. Your relationship with your son will be permanently damaged. There will be no family dinners, no reconciliation, no pretending this didn't happen. You need to be absolutely certain this is the path you want to take. I thought about Thomas, about the 30 years we'd spent building that lake house together, about every board he'd hammered, every window he'd installed, every memory we'd created there. I thought about the promise I'd made to myself at his funeral, that I would honor his legacy, that I would protect what we'd built together. I'm certain, I said. File everything. Do whatever it takes to protect my property and stop him from doing this to anyone else. Marcus nodded and immediately began drafting documents. While Marcus worked on the legal filings, I went home and continued my investigation. If Chris had been manipulating my property ownership, what else had he been doing? I started with my bank accounts. I had 3. A checking account for monthly expenses, a savings account with about $45,000 that represented my entire emergency fund, and a small investment account that Thomas had set up years ago. The checking account looked normal. Regular deposits of my Social Security and pension payments, regular withdrawals for utilities, groceries, and other expenses. Nothing unusual. The savings account also looked fine at first, but when I went back through 6 months of statements, I noticed something odd. There were occasional transfers out of the account, usually around $2,000 to $3,000, labeled as property maintenance or emergency repairs. I didn't remember authorizing those transfers. I didn't remember any emergency repairs that would have cost thousands of dollars. I called the bank. After being transferred 3 times and spending 40 minutes on hold, I finally reached someone who could help me. Mrs. Whitmore, those transfers were all authorized by Christopher Whitmore, who is listed as a joint account holder on your savings account. My stomach dropped. Joint account holder? When was he added to that account? There was typing on the other end. According to our records, he was added in January of last year. You came into the branch with him and signed the paperwork to add him as a joint owner with full withdrawal privileges. January of last year? Right after my health scare, right when I'd been scared and vulnerable and willing to let Chris help me organize my affairs. Do you have copies of the paperwork I signed? I can request that from our document archives. It typically takes 3 to 5 business days. Please send it to me immediately. I need to see exactly what I signed. After I hung up, I checked the total amount of the property maintenance withdrawals. Over the past 14 months, Chris had transferred nearly $38,000 out of my savings account. $38,000. I felt the room spinning. That was more than 80% of my entire emergency fund. Money I'd saved carefully over years. Money that was supposed to last me through retirement. Money that was supposed to pay for medical emergencies or home repairs or anything else life threw at me in my old age. And Chris had been slowly draining it, $2,000 to $3,000 at a time, claiming it was for property maintenance. But there had been no property maintenance. The lake house was in the same condition it had been 2 years ago. Better, actually, because Chris had been supposedly checking on it regularly. So where had the money gone? I knew the answer even before I fully formed the question. The money had gone to fund his affair. His trips to the lake house with Sienna, the restaurants, the champagne, the luxury lifestyle she documented so carefully on Instagram. My son had been spending my retirement savings on his mistress. I called Marcus Chan immediately. "This changes things significantly," he said after I explained what I'd found. "This isn't just property fraud anymore. This is theft. Grand theft. He's stolen nearly $40,000 from a vulnerable adult. That's a felony charge, Eleanor. If we report this, he could face prison time." Prison. My son could go to prison because of what he'd done to me. "I need to think about this," I said. "He's my son. He's Sophia and Emma's father. If he goes to prison, it's because of his own choices, Eleanor, not yours. You didn't steal from yourself. He did. And he did it knowing exactly what he was doing and who he was hurting." That afternoon, while I was still processing the magnitude of Chris's theft, Diane called me. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something. I've been going through our joint financial records and I found something disturbing." My heart sank. "What did you find?" "I found Chris has a credit card I didn't know about. It's in his name only, but the billing address is our house, so the statements were coming mixed in with our other mail. I never opened them because I assumed they were his business expenses. But today, I looked."
And? There are charges going back 18 months. Hotels, restaurants, jewelry stores. A charge for $15,000 to a luxury resort in Cabo San Lucas. Eleanor, we never went to Cabo. I've never been to Mexico. He took her to Cabo? Apparently. Last December. I thought he was at a real estate conference in Phoenix. He was gone for 5 days. The credit card shows he was actually in Mexico with her. I closed my eyes. Every new revelation felt like another punch to the gut. "The total on this card is over $87,000, Diane continued, her voice shaking. "He's been financing this entire affair on credit, and now we're drowning in debt I didn't even know existed. The minimum payments alone are going to be impossible to manage." "Diane, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. I'm calling because I found something else. There are charges to a law firm, Silverman and Associates. Multiple charges totaling about $12,000 over the past 6 months." "A law firm? Why would he need a lawyer?" "That's what I wondered, so I called them. I claimed I was following up on billing questions for my husband. They told me the charges were related to estate planning and property transfer consultation services." The implications hit me immediately. He was paying lawyers to help him figure out how to steal my property? It looks that way. He wasn't just doing this on a whim, Eleanor. He was getting professional advice on how to do it legally, or at least how to make it look legal. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing this new level of calculation and betrayal. "There's one more thing," Diane said quietly. "I looked at his text messages. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. There are conversations with Sienna going back almost 2 years, not just one. The affair started much earlier than we thought." 2 years? He'd been lying for 2 years. What did the messages say? Everything you'd expect. Love declarations, planning their future together. But Eleanor, there are also messages about you, about your health, about the property. Sienna keeps asking when the old lady is finally going to let go of that house, and Chris keeps reassuring her that he's working on it and that he's almost got full control. The old lady. Just like she called me to my face yesterday. There's a text from 3 months ago that I think you need to know about. Sienna wrote, "I'm tired of waiting. Just tell her you're selling the place. She's old. What's she gonna do about it?" And Chris responded, "Patience, baby. I can't just take it from her. I need to do this carefully so she doesn't fight back. Once I have the deed transferred, it won't matter what she thinks." I felt something cold settle in my chest. My son had been plotting against me for months.
discussing me with his mistress like I was an obstacle to overcome rather than his mother. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I'm taking the girls to my mother's house in Boulder. I can't stay in that house one more night knowing what he's done. Not just to you, but to our family, to our daughters. How are Sophia and Emma? I haven't told them yet. I don't know how to tell them that their father is a liar and a thief, that he chose his affair over their stability, that he stole from their grandmother. Her voice broke. How do I tell them that? You tell them the truth. When the time is right, you tell them the truth. They deserve to know who their father really is. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet house and tried to reconcile the man I'd raised with the man who had done these things. The sweet little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. The teenager who'd worked 2 jobs to save money for college. The young man who'd cried at his father's funeral and promised me he'd always take care of me. Where had that person gone? When had he become someone capable of stealing from his own mother, lying to his wife, and prioritizing his selfish desires over his children's well-being? Or had he always been capable of this and I'd simply been too blind to see it? 3 days later, the paperwork from the bank arrived. The documents I'd supposedly signed to add Chris as a joint account holder on my savings account. I spread them out on my kitchen table and studied them carefully. There was my signature on the account modification form. It certainly looked like my handwriting. The date was January 15th of last year, right after my health scare, right when I'd been scared and vulnerable. But something was wrong. I pulled out other documents I know I'd signed around that same time period. The power of attorney forms, the deed modification, other estate planning paperwork. I compared the signatures. They were similar, but not identical. The slope of the letters was slightly different. The pressure of the pen was inconsistent. Small details that most people wouldn't notice, but became obvious when you compared them side by side. I called Patricia Wu. I think Chris forged my signature on the bank documents. Are you certain? As certain as I can be without a professional analysis, but Patricia, if he forged my signature, that changes everything, doesn't it? It makes it criminal fraud. Unquestionably criminal. Eleanor, you need to take these documents to Marcus Chen immediately, and you need to consider reporting this to the police.
The police. The idea of my son being investigated by the police, potentially being arrested, facing criminal charges, it made me physically ill. But the alternative was letting him get away with it, letting him continue to prey on vulnerable people. Because if he had done this to me, his own mother, what would he do to someone else? What would he do to his next victim? I gathered up all the documents and drove to Marcus Chen's office. Marcus brought in a forensic document examiner at that same afternoon. Dr. Rebecca Thornton was a specialist who'd testified in hundreds of cases involving question documents and signature analysis. She studied my signatures for 2 hours using magnification equipment, digital comparison software, and techniques I didn't fully understand. Finally, she looked up at me with a grave expression. Mrs. Whitmore, in my professional opinion, the signature on the bank account modification documents is not yours. It's a skilled forgery, someone who had access to your genuine signatures and attempted to replicate your handwriting style. But there are several telltale signs that indicate this was not written by your hand. The pressure patterns are inconsistent, the terminal stroke directions are wrong, and there are hesitation marks that suggest careful copying rather than natural writing flow. How confident are you in this assessment? Confident enough to testify to it in court? This is forgery. Marcus looked at me with an expression that was both compassionate and serious. Eleanor, we've now documented property fraud, financial theft, and forgery. These are serious criminal offenses. If you want to proceed, I need to report this to law enforcement.
Once I do that, the case is out of your hands. The district attorney will decide whether to file charges. You won't be able to stop the process or protect your son from the consequences. I thought about Sophia and Emma, two innocent girls who would have to grow up knowing their father was a criminal. I thought about Chris, who, despite everything, was still my son. I thought about our family, which would be irreparably destroyed if I took this step. But then I thought about Thomas, about the life we'd built together, about the promises I'd made to honor his memory and protect what we created. And I thought about Sienna's cruel words, "You're just a bitter old woman," about Chris's calculated deception, about the text messages discussing how to manipulate the old lady into giving up her property. They hadn't just betrayed me, they dehumanized me, reduced me to an obstacle in their way, treated me like I didn't matter, like my life and my property and my memories were just resources for them to exploit. File the complaint. Report everything to the police. My son made his choices. Now he can face the consequences. Marcus nodded and began making calls. The police investigation moved quickly. Within 48 hours, 2 detectives from the Denver Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit came to my house to take a formal statement. They photographed all the documents, they interviewed Patricia and Diane, they requested records from the bank, the insurance company, the county assessor's office. On Friday afternoon, 5 days after the initial confrontation at the lake house, Detective Sarah Morrison called me. "Mrs. Whitmore, we have enough evidence to make an arrest. We're going to pick up your son this evening. I wanted to give you advance notice so you're not blindsided when you see it on the news." On the news? He's a prominent businessman. An arrest for financial elder abuse, fraud, and forgery is going to generate media attention. I'm sorry, but you should prepare yourself for that. She was right. By 8 p.m. that evening, my phone was ringing off the hook. Reporters wanting statements. Neighbors wanting to know if what they had heard was true. My other children, Chris's younger brother and sister, calling in shock and disbelief. The hardest call came from Sophia. "Grandma Eleanor?" Her voice was small, broken. "Is it true? Did Dad really steal from you?" "Sweetheart, this is complicated. Did he or didn't he? Please, I need to know if my father is actually a criminal." I took a breath. "Yes, he took money from me without permission. He forged my signature on documents. He tried to steal my property. I'm sorry, Sophia, but it's true." The silence on the other end was devastating. Then, quietly, "Mom's been crying for 3 days straight. Emma won't come out of her room. Our entire life just fell apart and I don't understand why. Why would he do this? Why would he destroy everything?" "I don't know, honey. I wish I had an answer for you." "Did you have to report him to the police? He's my dad. I know he did something wrong, but did you have to get him arrested?" The question hurt because I'd been asking myself the same thing for days. "Sophia, your father didn't just make a mistake. He committed crimes, multiple crimes, over a long period of time. He stole from me, he lied to your mother, and he was planning to take away property that belongs to me. If I hadn't stopped him, he would have succeeded. And then what? Would he have done this to someone else? Would he have taught you and Emma that it's okay to steal from elderly people as long as you're family?" "No, but..." "There are no buts here, sweetheart. Your father made choices, very bad choices, and now he has to face the consequences of those choices. I'm sorry that hurts you. I'm sorry this is destroying your family, but I won't apologize for protecting myself from someone who is actively stealing from me, even if that someone is my own son."
By Saturday morning, the story was everywhere.
Prominent Denver developer arrested for elder abuse. Son accused of stealing from 70-year-old mother. Financial fraud case rocks local real estate community. The local news stations were camped outside Chris's house and outside mine. Reporters knocked on my door throughout the day. My phone never stopped ringing. The whole thing was humiliating and exhausting. But what was worse was the public reaction. Social media exploded with opinions about the case. Half the people called Chris a monster and praised me for standing up to financial abuse. The other half accused me of destroying my own family over money, called me vindictive and cruel for having my son arrested. The comment sections were brutal. What kind of mother sends her own son to jail? She should be ashamed. She's probably confused and senile. He was probably just trying to help manage her affairs. Gold diggers come in all ages, I guess. She probably wanted attention. But there were also supportive comments. Elder financial abuse is a serious crime. Good for her for fighting back. My grandmother went through this with my uncle. It destroyed her financially. I'm glad this woman caught it in time. People need to understand that family members are often the worst financial abusers because they have access and trust. I tried not to read the comments, but it was impossible to completely avoid them. Every time I looked at my phone, someone had sent me a screenshot or a link to another article. On Sunday, Sienna gave an interview to a local TV station. I watched it with a mixture of fury and disbelief. She sat there, looking perfectly composed in a tasteful navy dress, and told her side of the story. I had no idea Chris was doing anything illegal. He told me his mother had given him the lake house, that it was his property to share with me. When I found out the truth, that he'd been lying to me too, I was devastated. I'm just as much a victim here as anyone. The interviewer asked, "But you posted on social media about it being your forever home. Didn't that suggest you thought you owned it?" Chris told me it was going to be ours. I trusted him. I believed him when he said everything was handled legally. I had no reason to doubt him. Lies. All lies. I had the text messages proving she'd known exactly what was happening, that she'd been pushing Chris to just take the house from the old lady. But watching her on TV, looking innocent and victimized, I realized how good she was at manipulation, how practiced she was at playing the victim while simultaneously being the predator. The Monday morning after Chris's arrest, I woke up to find 3 news vans parked outside my small Lakewood house. Reporters stood on the sidewalk with cameras and microphones waiting for me to emerge. I closed the curtains and called Marcus Chen. "They're camped outside my house. I can't even get my mail without being ambushed." "Don't talk to any of them," Marcus warned. "Anything you say can be twisted or used against you later. Let me draft an official statement you can release through my office. That way, you control the narrative." But controlling the narrative proved impossible. The story had taken on a life of its own. By Tuesday, 3 different media outlets had run in-depth profiles on Chris, the golden boy of Denver real estate who had fallen from grace. They interviewed his business associates, former clients, college friends. Everyone had an opinion about what had happened and why. What disturbed me most was how many people defended him. His business partner, Gerald Thompson, gave an interview saying, "Chris is a brilliant businessman who sometimes gets too focused on his goals. This situation with his mother is unfortunate, but I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Chris would never intentionally hurt anyone, especially his own family." His college roommate told reporters, "I've known Chris for 25 years. He's always been ambitious, yes, but he's also generous and loyal. His mother must be confused about what happened. Maybe she's experiencing some cognitive decline and doesn't remember giving him permission to handle her finances." Cognitive decline. That phrase kept appearing in comments and articles. People assumed that because I was 70, I must be confused, senile, unable to accurately assess what had happened to me. Detective Morrison called me Tuesday afternoon with an update on the investigation. "Mrs. Whitmore, we've been going through your son's financial records and we found some additional concerning transactions. Can you come down to the station tomorrow morning?
I'd like to walk you through what we've discovered. Wednesday morning, I sat in a small conference room at the Denver Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Detective Morrison was there, along with her partner, Detective James Rodriguez, and a financial crimes analyst named Kevin Park. They had spreadsheets covering the entire conference table. Mrs. Whitmore, Detective Morrison began, when we started investigating your son's financial activities, we expected to find evidence related to the theft from your accounts and the property fraud. What we found was significantly more extensive. Kevin Park pulled up a presentation on his laptop and projected it on the wall. Let me walk you through what we've discovered. These are your bank accounts, the ones Christopher had access to. Over the past 18 months, he withdrew approximately $38,000, as you already know, but that's only part of the story.
He clicked to the next slide. We subpoenaed records from all financial institutions where Christopher has accounts or signatory authority. What we found is that he's been engaging in a pattern of financial manipulation that extends beyond just your accounts. What do you mean? Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. Your son has been running what we call a long-term financial exploitation scheme. He identified multiple elderly individuals, primarily widows in their late 60s and 70s, and gradually gained their trust. Then he used various methods to access their finances. I felt my stomach drop. Multiple people? This wasn't just about me? We've identified at least 7 other potential victims so far, Kevin said. All of them are women who lost their husbands in the past 5 to 10 years. All of them own valuable property. And all of them granted Christopher some level of financial authority, either power of attorney, joint account access, or property management responsibilities. He clicked through slides showing names I didn't recognize. Martha Brennan, 68. Susan Kowalski, 72, Patricia Delgado, 71, Linda Yamamoto, 69, 5 more women, all around my age, all widows. How did he meet these women? I asked, though I was starting to suspect the answer. Most of them were clients of his real estate development company, Detective Morrison explained. He would approach widows who owned valuable property, usually property their husbands had left them, and offered to help them maximize their investment or develop their assets. He was very good at identifying vulnerable people who were grieving, lonely, and uncertain about managing complex financial matters alone. And then he stole from them. In various ways, yes. Sometimes it was unauthorized withdrawals from bank accounts. Sometimes it was property transactions that benefited him rather than them. Sometimes it was steering them into bad investments that generated commissions for him. The methods varied, but the pattern was consistent. Find vulnerable elderly women, gain their trust, and exploit their finances. I felt sick. My son wasn't just a liar and a thief. He was a predator who systematically targeted grieving widows. How much total? I asked quietly. Kevin consulted his spreadsheet. We're still calculating, but preliminary estimates suggest he's stolen or fraudulently obtained somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 from these women over the past 3 years. 3 years. The same period when I'd thought he was building his successful real estate development business, when I'd been so proud of how well he was doing, when I'd bragged to my friends about my successful son. Have you contacted these other women? Do they know? We're in the process of reaching out to them now, Detective Morrison said. But here's where it gets complicated. Some of them may not realize they've been victimized. Your son was very careful to take amounts that weren't immediately noticeable. A few thousand here, a few thousand there, always with plausible explanations. Some of these women may think he was legitimately helping them. What about Sienna? Was she involved in all of this? The 3 investigators exchanged glances. Detective Rodriguez spoke carefully. That's still under investigation. What we know so far is that Ms. Castellano worked as a property investment consultant and had professional connections to your son.
They appear to have started their personal relationship about 2 years ago. Whether she was aware or participated in the financial exploitation of other victims is something we're still determining. But she knew about me. She knew he was stealing from me. We believe so, yes. We have the text messages you provided showing she was aware and encouraging of his attempts to take control of your lake house property. Whether that makes her criminally liable is a question for the district attorney. Kevin pulled up another slide. There's one more thing we need to show you. This is particularly disturbing. The slide showed a list of properties. I recognized my lake house address, but there were 6 other addresses listed as well. What are these? These are properties your son acquired or attempted to acquire from his victims. In 2 cases, he successfully convinced elderly women to sign over the property to him, claiming he would manage it for them or develop it for their benefit. In reality, he took ownership and either sold the properties or used them as collateral for loans. He did this to other people successfully. He actually stole their homes. In 2 confirmed cases, yes, Martha Brennan signed over her late husband's commercial property in Golden to Christopher. She believed he was going to lease it out and give her the rental income. Instead, he sold it for $275,000 and kept the money. She didn't realize what had happened until 6 months later when she received a property tax bill for property she no longer owned. Dear God! Susan Kowalski transferred her family cabin in Grand Lake to Christopher under the belief that he was putting it in a trust for her grandchildren. Instead, he used it as collateral for a business loan. When that loan went into default, the property was foreclosed. Mrs. Kowalski lost everything. I put my head in my hands. This wasn't just my story anymore. This was a pattern of systematic abuse that had destroyed multiple lives. Mrs. Withermore, Detective Morrison said gently, I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to understand something. If you hadn't caught him when you did, if you hadn't been sharp enough to notice the discrepancies and brave enough to report them, he would have continued doing this to other people. You stopped him. Your willingness to come forward and press charges has potentially saved other women from being victimized.
But I didn't know about any of this. I thought it was just me. That's often how these cases work. Predators rely on their victims feeling isolated and ashamed. They count on people not reporting because they're embarrassed or because they don't want to believe a family member or trusted professional would hurt them. You broke that cycle. Over the next week, Detective Morrison arranged for me to meet with 2 of the other victims, women who had already been contacted and agreed to cooperate with the investigation. The first was Martha Brennan. We met at a coffee shop in Golden, a small mountain town west of Denver. Martha was 68, with short gray hair and weary eyes that looked like they'd seen too much disappointment. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, I said, as we sat down with our coffees. The detective said you're Christopher's mother. That must be hard for you. I'm still trying to process it. How did you meet him? Martha's story was painfully familiar. Her husband had died 4 years ago, leaving her a commercial property in downtown Golden that had been in his family for 3 generations. The building generated rental income, but Martha found the management responsibilities overwhelming. Christopher approached me at my husband's funeral, she said quietly. Can you believe that? He came to the funeral. I don't even know how he knew about it. And he gave me his card. He said he specialized in helping widows manage commercial properties. He was so kind, so understanding. He talked about how he'd helped his own mother after his father died. I closed my eyes. He'd used my widowhood as part of his sales pitch. He offered to take over the property management for a small fee. He said he'd handle everything, finding tenants, collecting rent, dealing with maintenance issues. All I had to do was sign some paperwork giving him authority to manage the property on my behalf. And then, for about 6 months, everything seemed fine. I received monthly checks for the rental income, minus his management fee.
He would call occasionally to update me on tenant situations or building repairs. I thought I'd found someone trustworthy to help me navigate this overwhelming responsibility. When did things change? About 8 months after I hired him, he came to me with a proposal. He said the property needed major renovations, new roof, updated electrical, ADA compliance modifications. He said it would cost about $80,000, but it would significantly increase the property value and rental income. He offered to oversee the renovations if he gave him full authority to make decisions about the property. Did you? I signed papers transferring the property into his name temporarily, with the understanding that he would transfer it back once the renovations were complete and I'd recouped my investment. He assured me this was standard practice for property development projects. I already knew where this was going. He never transferred it back. No, he sold it 6 weeks later for $275,000. I found out when I received a letter from the new owner asking about historical property information. When I confronted Christopher, he claimed there had been a miscommunication about our agreement. He said the papers I'd signed were actually a sale agreement, not a temporary transfer. He showed me documents with my signature agreeing to sell the property to him for $85,000, far below market value. Did you sign those documents? I signed something. I don't know if it was those specific documents. He brought me so much paperwork, telling me it was all related to the renovation project. I trusted him, so I signed where he told me to sign without reading every page carefully. I was stupid. You weren't stupid. You were grieving and overwhelmed, and he exploited that. Did you report it to the police? I consulted a lawyer. He told me that proving fraud would be difficult because I had signed documents transferring the property. He said Christopher could claim I knew what I was signing and simply regretted the decision later. The legal fees to fight it would cost more than I could afford. So I just let it go. I lost my husband's family property, and there was nothing I could do about it. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Martha looked at me with fierce determination. But now the police are investigating. Now there's evidence of a pattern. Now maybe there's a chance to hold him accountable and get justice for all of us. The next day, I met with Susan Kowalski in her modest apartment in Thornton, a northern suburb of Denver. Susan was 72, a petite woman with a thick Polish accent who'd immigrated to the United States 40 years ago. Her story was different in details, but similar in pattern. Susan's husband had left her a family cabin on Grand Lake, a beautiful property that had been his parents' vacation home. After his death, Susan couldn't bring herself to visit the cabin because the memories were too painful. The property sat unused for over a year. Christopher had contacted her through a mutual acquaintance at church. He told her he specialized in managing vacation properties for people who couldn't use them regularly. He offered to rent it out as a short-term vacation rental, generating income for Susan while maintaining the property in good condition. He was so charming, Susan said. He talked about his own family's lake house and how much it meant to him. He understood the sentimental value. He promised he would take care of my husband's family cabin like it was his own.
Then he approached her with a different proposal. He suggested she transfer the property into a family trust for her grandchildren. He explained that this would avoid probate when she died and would ensure the cabin stayed in the family for future generations. I have 3 grandchildren, Susan explained. The idea that they could enjoy the cabin their great-grandparents built, that seemed like a beautiful legacy. Christopher said he would handle all the legal paperwork for setting up the trust. But the property was never transferred into a trust for Susan's grandchildren. Instead, Christopher transferred it into his own name and used it as collateral for a $150,000 business loan. When the loan went into default, the lender foreclosed on the property. Susan lost the cabin. I found out when I received a notice from the bank about the foreclosure proceedings. I called Christopher, and he said there had been a complication with the trust paperwork. He said the foreclosure was temporary and he would sort everything out. He asked me not to talk to any lawyers or make a fuss because it would complicate the legal situation. Did you believe him? For a while, yes. I wanted to believe him because the alternative, that someone had stolen my family's property, was too painful to accept. But then I received a letter from the new owner of the cabin. They'd purchased it at the foreclosure auction. It was gone. Permanently. Susan started crying, quiet tears running down her weathered face. My husband worked 3 jobs to help his parents pay off that cabin. It was the place where we celebrated 50 years of birthdays and holidays, where my children learned to swim, where my grandchildren heard stories about their great-grandparents who fled Poland during the war. And I signed it all away to a man I trusted because he said he was helping me. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm so sorry this happened to you. The detective told me that your son was trying to take your property too, but you caught him. You stopped him before he succeeded. You're braver than I was. I'm not brave. I'm just so angry, and I realized that if I didn't stop him, he would keep doing this to other people. He would keep destroying lives and stealing memories and getting away with it because people like us are too ashamed to fight back. Susan squeezed my hand. Will you testify against him if there's a trial? Yes. Will you? Yes. I want everyone to know what he did. I want my grandchildren to understand that I didn't just carelessly lose their inheritance. I want justice. The following week, Marcus Chen and I had a meeting with the district attorney's office. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Caldwell was handling the case, a sharp woman in her early 40s with a reputation for aggressively prosecuting financial crimes. Mrs. Whitmore, I want to be completely transparent with you about what we're facing with this case. Your son is going to have an excellent legal team. He's already retained David Hoffman from Morrison and Klein, one of the best criminal defense attorneys in Colorado. They're going to fight every charge. What charges are you filing? Based on the evidence we've gathered so far, we're looking at multiple felony counts: financial exploitation of an at-risk adult, theft, forgery, criminal impersonation, fraud. We're also looking at charges related to the other victims: theft by deception, exploitation of elderly persons, potentially RICO charges if we can establish that he was running an organized criminal enterprise. RICO? Like the mafia? The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act can apply to any ongoing criminal enterprise. If we can show that your son was systematically targeting vulnerable elderly women and using a pattern of fraud to steal from them over an extended period, RICO charges could be appropriate. Those carry much more serious penalties. How serious? We're potentially looking at 10 to 20 years in prison if convicted on all counts. The number hit me like a physical blow. 20 years. My son could spend the next 2 decades in prison because of what he'd done. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to prepare you for what's coming. Your son's defense team is going to attack your credibility. They're going to suggest you're confused, that you have memory problems, that you gave him permission for everything he did and simply don't remember. They're going to paint him as a devoted son who was trying to help his aging mother manage complex financial matters. But I'm not confused. I remember everything perfectly. I believe you. The evidence supports you. But the defense doesn't need to prove you're actually confused. They just need to create reasonable doubt in the jury's minds.
They'll bring in experts who will testify about age-related cognitive decline. They'll point to the fact that you gave him power of attorney and added him to your accounts. They'll argue that these were voluntary decisions that prove you trusted him to make financial decisions on your behalf. So what do? We build the strongest possible case. We use the pattern of his behavior with other victims to show this wasn't about helping his mother, it was about exploiting vulnerable people for financial gain. We show the text messages with his girlfriend where they discuss manipulating the old lady. We showed the forged signatures. We showed the systematic theft from multiple elderly women. We make it impossible for the jury to see him as anything other than what he is, a predator who targeted his own mother and other vulnerable women for financial exploitation.
Jennifer pulled out a folder filled with documents. I also need to prepare you for the media attention this is going to generate. Once we file formal charges, especially if we include RICO counts, this becomes a major news story. Prominent businessman accused of running elder abuse scheme. It's going to dominate local news for weeks. You'll be asked to give interviews. Your photo will be in newspapers. Your life will be under scrutiny. I don't want attention. I just want my property protected, and I want him stopped from doing this to other people. I understand, but part of stopping him means making this public. It means other potential victims seeing the news coverage and coming forward. It means people understanding that elder financial abuse is a serious crime with serious consequences. You can be the face of that. You can be the person who fought back and refused to let her son get away with theft. 2 weeks after Chris's arrest, we had the preliminary hearing. This was a court proceeding where the prosecution would present evidence to show there was probable cause for the charges. It wasn't a trial, the jury wouldn't decide guilt or innocence, but it would give us our first glimpse of the defense's strategy. The courthouse was packed. Media filled the gallery. I saw Diane sitting with her mother in the back row. I saw Sophia and Emma, their faces pale and drawn. I saw Chris's business associates and friends. And I saw Chris, sitting at the defense table in an expensive suit, looking every inch the successful businessman rather than the accused criminal. Our eyes met for just a moment across the courtroom. I expected to see anger or resentment. Instead, I saw something that looked almost like pleading, as if he was begging me to stop this, to take it all back, to remember that he was my son and family should protect each other no matter what. I looked away. The prosecution presented a summary of evidence: bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals, testimony from forensic document examiners about forged signatures, financial records showing the pattern of exploitation across multiple victims. It was damning and comprehensive. Then the defense had their turn. David Hoffman was exactly what I had expected. Silver-haired, confident, with the kind of smooth delivery that made you want to trust him. He argued that everything Christopher had done was done with my knowledge and permission. Your Honor, what we have here is not a criminal case, but a family dispute. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore is 70 years old. She voluntarily gave her son power of attorney. She voluntarily added him as a joint account holder on her financial accounts. She voluntarily placed him on the deed to her property. These were not the actions of someone who distrusted her son. These were the actions of someone who wanted her son to help her manage her increasingly complex financial affairs. He continued, "What happened here is that Mrs. Whitmore later regretted these decisions. Perhaps she was influenced by her daughter-in-law, who is going through a difficult divorce with Mr. Whitmore. Perhaps she simply changed her mind about how she wanted her estate managed. But changing your mind about a voluntary decision does not make that decision criminal. As for the other alleged victims the prosecution has mentioned, we will show that Mr. Whitmore was providing legitimate property management and financial consulting services to these individuals. Any transactions that occurred were conducted with full knowledge and consent of the property owners. The prosecution is attempting to criminalize normal business practices simply because Mr. Whitmore's clients later experienced seller's remorse."
Judge Patricia Hernandez listened to both sides carefully. Then she announced, "I find that the prosecution has presented sufficient evidence for probable cause. The case will proceed to trial. Bail is continued at $500,000. Next court date is set for May 15th. The gavel came down. Chris would stand trial for what he'd done. That evening, I received a call from my daughter, Rebecca. She was my youngest child, 42 years old, a teacher living in Colorado Springs with her husband and 3 children. "Mom, I need to talk to you about Chris." "I know this is difficult for you, honey." "Difficult? Mom, you're destroying our family. Chris called me from jail. He's devastated. He says he was trying to help you, and you've turned this into some kind of criminal case because Diane convinced him he was stealing." "Rebecca, he was stealing. He forged my signature on bank documents. He took $38,000 from my savings account without permission. He tried to transfer my lake house to his girlfriend." "He says you gave him permission for all of that. He says you asked him to manage your finances because you were worried about making mistakes. He says the transfer documents were just preliminary estate planning and you misunderstood." "Did he mention the other women? The 7 other elderly widows he stole from?" Silence on the other end. "Rebecca, your brother wasn't just lying to me. He was running a systematic scheme to defraud vulnerable people. The police have evidence. The district attorney is filing RICO charges. This isn't a misunderstanding or a family dispute. This is real criminal activity." "But he's my brother. He's your son. How can you do this to him? How can you put him in prison?" "I'm not putting him in prison. His own actions put him there. I'm just refusing to let him get away with it." "What about Sophia and Emma? Have you thought about what this is doing to them? Their father is in jail because their grandmother reported him to the police. How do you think that makes them feel?" The guilt hit me like a wave. I had thought about Sophia and Emma constantly. I thought about how their lives were being destroyed by their father's choices and by my decision to hold him accountable for those choices.
I know this hurts them, but Rebecca, what kind of lesson would I be teaching them if I let their father steal from me and other vulnerable people without consequences? What would I be telling them about right and wrong, about accountability, about standing up for yourself even when it's hard? You're teaching them that family doesn't matter, that you'd rather have revenge than preserve your relationships with your children and grandchildren. This isn't about revenge, it's about justice. It's about stopping someone who is hurting people and would have continued hurting people if someone didn't stop him. Then you've made your choice. You've chosen your principles over your family. I hope it's worth it when you're alone and none of your grandchildren want anything to do with you." She hung up. I sat there, holding the phone, tears streaming down my face. My middle son, David, hadn't called at all. I didn't know if that was better or worse than Rebecca's anger. My family was fracturing. Half of them sided with Chris, believing his version of events, or at least believing that family loyalty should override everything else. The other half, primarily Diane and her daughters, understood what he'd done, but were themselves so damaged by the situation that our relationships would never be the same. I'd stopped Chris from stealing my property. I'd prevented him from victimizing more elderly women. I'd stood up for myself and demanded accountability. But the cost was almost everything else I cared about. That night, unable to sleep, I drove up to the lake house. It was past midnight when I arrived. The mountain air was cold and crisp, the stars brilliant against the dark sky. I walked down to the dock, the same dock where Thomas had proposed to me 42 years ago, where we'd watched countless sunsets, where we'd scattered some of his ashes after the funeral. I sat there in the darkness and asked myself the question that had been haunting me for weeks. Had I done the right thing? My son was facing decades in prison. My family was torn apart. My grandchildren might never forgive me. Half the community thought I was a vindictive old woman who destroyed her own son out of spite or confusion. But
7 other women had been victimized. Thousands of dollars had been stolen. Property had been taken. Lives had been damaged. And it would have continued if I hadn't stopped it. I thought about what Thomas would have wanted. He'd loved Chris deeply. He'd been so proud of the man Chris had become, or the man we thought he'd become. But Thomas had also taught Chris about integrity, about honesty, about treating people with respect. He'd taught all our children that actions have consequences and that family love doesn't mean protecting each other from accountability. I hope I did the right thing, I whispered to the darkness, to Thomas's memory, to the universe. I hope this was worth the price I'm paying. The lake was silent, offering no answers. Just the gentle lap of water against the shore and the distant call of a night bird. I stayed there until dawn, watching the sunrise over the mountains, illuminating the property that Thomas and I had built together, the property I had fought to protect, the property that had cost me everything. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged signatures, stolen money, 7 elderly women testifying about Christopher's systematic exploitation. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Christopher was sentenced to 15 years in prison. But before sentencing, something happened that changed everything. Sienna, facing her own charges as an accomplice, made a deal with prosecutors. She provided evidence that Christopher had planned something even worse. He'd been preparing to have me declared mentally incompetent. She handed over emails showing he'd been consulting with doctors about getting me evaluated for dementia, planning to use a diagnosis to take complete control of all my assets. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was planning to erase me entirely. The night after sentencing, I drove to the lake house one final time. I brought the original property deed, the one Thomas and I had signed 30 years ago, the one with both our names, symbolizing everything we'd built together. I also brought the modified deed, the one showing Christopher as joint tenant, the document that had nearly destroyed everything. On the beach, I built a small fire in the stone pit Thomas had constructed. As flames grew against the dark mountain sky, I held up both documents. This is for every woman he hurt, for Martha, who lost her husband's commercial building, for Susan, who lost her family cabin, for all of us he tried to erase. I burned the modified deed first, watching Christopher's name curl and blacken in the flames. Then I held the original deed, mine and Thomas's, safely against my chest. The next morning, I filed new paperwork with the county. The lake house was mine alone again. Clear title, no joint tenants. I also did something unexpected. I established a trust that would transfer the property to Sophia and Emma when I died, bypassing their father entirely. 6 months later, Diane's divorce was finalized. She got full custody of the girls and most of the assets. Christopher's real estate company collapsed under the weight of scandal. Rebecca and David still don't speak to me. They chose to believe their brother's version of events, that I was a vindictive mother who destroyed her son over a misunderstanding. That loss still hurts. But Sophia called me last week. She's 20 now, mature enough to understand what really happened. "Grandma," she said, her voice shaking, "I read all the court documents. I know what Dad did to you and those other women. I'm so sorry we didn't believe you at first."
You were protecting your father, I told her. That's what children do. No, she said firmly. You were protecting everyone else from him. That's what heroes do. I'm 71 now. I still live in my small Lakewood house. I still visit the lake house, though the memories are bittersweet now. I lost half my family, but I saved my home and stopped a predator. Some people ask if it was worth it, sacrificing family relationships for justice. I tell them to ask the 7 women whose lives Christopher destroyed. I tell them to ask the future victims who were spared because someone finally stopped him. Yes, it was worth it. Every painful, heartbreaking moment was worth it. What do you think about Eleanor's choice? Would you have done the same? Comment below with your city and your thoughts. Thank you for following this story to the end.